Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
Dude, we are consummate professionals. The UK's best podcasters.
Exactly.
Live and coming to you direct. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
the show goes on, right? And I think
exactly.
These things always happen. So I think it's all about showing up at the end of the day, isn't it? So
exactly, I make it up for being so amazingly charismatic, so it's fine.
Love it, Greg. Of course. No, I do love the actual podcast. I think like the conversational nature of it, like the quality of the guests. I think you're doing some great work in the ecosystem. So as a fellow podcaster, I just have to say thank you for all the hard work that you do. And
I appreciate that, man. And likewise. While we're doing the ass kissing, might as well get out of the way. No, I do really, really appreciate that, and it does really mean a lot coming from someone else who does a very, a similar thing, albeit in a slightly different format. And the same back at you. I love the format that you do. I must admit, don't get anywhere near as much time as I would like to listen to your or other people's podcasts for that reason. As you know, once you're a podcaster, you don't get time, to listen Greg, to them anymore. Yeah. People ask me all the time when they're in screener calls for being guests, like, what's your favorite podcast? I'm like, I don't have one. So anyway, it was my long way of saying I appreciate the compliment, and right back at you. We need people like you, and we're going to get into that. So actually, that's my very first request to make is of all my guests is to ask them to introduce themselves, and you can take as long or as little as you like. Go as far back as you like or wherever, but we'll get into it either way. So over to you, man. You got the spotlight. Tell the world who you are.
Thanks, Greg. So Ollie Tiramuragan Collard. I've been sort of involved in the startup scene since kind of graduating from university back in 2009, so the last sort of 14 years or so. My experience is really kind of supporting founders and entrepreneurs to become the best versions of themselves and really enable themselves to obviously grow their own businesses and essentially fulfill their dreams. So that's been in a number of different guises, I suppose. I set up my own consultancy, Enterprise Orchard, back in 2018. And I suppose the reason for doing that was, A, I was utilising my skill set. B, I kind of saw a bit of a gap in the market where, and I'll come on to this in a bit more detail later on, but I think the business support system is a bit broken in the UK. And I'll come back to that. And then thirdly, going back to the long history, I was actually born in India. My mum set up a fair trade clothing business there in the 1980s. She was basically pioneering organic hand-woven cotton clothing in the UK. So she speaks fluent Tamil. And basically, I was born there, spent a couple of months there, went back and forth between India 5 or 6 times in my childhood. Grew up in a retail shop basically on Gloucester Road here in Bristol. They had kind of 5 shops in the southwest, and I guess my passion for business really came from seeing firsthand the difference that business can make to both people and communities. So I think there was something like always just inside of me where I was like, I love business, I love entrepreneurship. And I just saw an opportunity to be able to put my skills to use to enable other entrepreneurs to obviously start and grow their own businesses, really. So that's where it all kind of came about.
That's super interesting. I didn't know that about you. I don't think you mentioned that to me when we first spoke about you being born in India. Or if you did, I
don't think I did. No.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, I always say it when I first speak to people. Then I think I said this to you, that I try and wipe my brain, wipe my brain clean of the conversation, so I come into it like with fresh eyes. But yeah, super interesting. Was it just yourself? Were you an only child? So it was just you and your parents ferreting sort of back and forth?
Yeah, so so my mum and dad were never kind of really together. My mum kind of went out there, had me. I was an only child to the age of 10, so I've got a brother and sister now from my mum, which is amazing having siblings. But I was only child to the age of 10.
It must have been intense.
Probably explains a few things, but
yeah. But I mean, I can definitely see where you got your exposure to entrepreneurship and then your interest in that later on. Very cool. So, and you run a podcast, right? We should talk about that a little bit before we kind of dig in the weeds a little bit more on like what you said there about consultancy, because I agree with some aspects of that. What is the podcast? Explain
So,
the
Founded and
formats.
Grounded, it's all about the honest realities of startup life, essentially, in a nutshell. The vision was, when we set it up in 2019, was that we saw there's some amazing podcasts out there speaking to the Richard Bransons, Elon Musk of the world, which is, very, very well documented. But I think if you're looking to start a business, or you're in the trenches of being a founder of an early stage company, you want to hear from other people who are like you. I think if you're hearing from the uber successful people, they're so far apart, like you don't know how to get there. So what you want is a roadmap of people who are in those early throes to be able to say, well, if Greg's doing it, why can't I do it? So that was the whole real premise of Founded and Grounded back in 2019. Obviously, it's changed and morphed and evolved as businesses and podcasts do over time. But that was the real premise of the show.
Is that what you're meant to do? Are you meant to change and morph over time? Shit. Okay.
Well, I mean, the crux and the vision of it, the North Star, and I always say this to other businesses, like, is the same, but the way in which it's delivered has changed and evolved over that sort of 5 to 6 year, 5 year period.
I upgraded the platform we use to record it, I suppose.
Saw that on Riverside now. Shout out to them.
Yeah. Going places, man.
But I guess it's I think the way in which it started. So I'll give you a quick story. So I was working at a organisation called Business West at the time. It's the Chamber of Commerce here in the Southwest. I was delivering startup support for them. I was doing a workshop actually, and then there was one person, we were doing like introductions, and he was saying he'd worked in like community radio and broadcasting. Basically, he was setting up a business at the time which was essentially capturing people's life stories on audio, kind of like desert island discs, basically. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. And like, he's got this most amazing voice. So Andrew, shout out to Andrew Parsonage here. And basically I said, oh, I think that's a really interesting concept. And it was quite timely, actually. At the time, it was my granddad's 80th birthday. And I was like, I didn't know what to get him. And I was like, wanted to get him something meaningful. And I was like, well, if you want me to be your first customer, let's do this. And so he went out to see my grandma and my granddad out in Wales, and he basically captured his entire life story. What he does is he says, like, go through like the 5 most defining moments of your life and put a soundtrack associated with that, and it's amazing. So like, I can now show my kids this audio. It can be passed down to generations. And there were some stories on there which I hadn't actually heard firsthand either. So I think it's just the most magical gift that he actually did. So that business is
awesome.
Extraordinary. Yeah. So a little shout out to him. Basically, I was like, at the time, I had this whole podcasting thing in my head, and I was like, right, so he's got the audio expertise. He's got the as I say, the most amazing warming voice and the editing experience. And I was like, well, I've got all this amazing kind of connections with startups. Let's just do a pilot of our episode. So basically, I live in South Bristol, and there was a new kind of zero waste shop opening at the bottom of my road, and I was like, Bristol's first zero waste shop, and I was like, I wonder if they want to come on the show. So even though there was no show that existed then, so basically went and interviewed them. This was obviously pre-COVID, so at the time I was doing all the interviews in person on a handheld microphone. So I went and interviewed Lydia and Stacey, and they were episode number 1 of Founded and Grounded. And the way in which we did it, and this was really much going back to kind of Andrew's expertise, was like working in radio and broadcasting. He was like, everything you do, you need to put the listener at the heart and center of it. And so the way in which we structured the show was that the kind of part 1 of the show is more about the origin story, the how and why they got started, what their mission and vision is, etc. Part 2 is basically around their kind of like their challenges, their support network, the real like reality part of it, like the warts and all part of the running the business. And then part 3 of the show is more around the future, the trends in the industry, where they see it going, their one piece of advice that they pass on to an early stage founder. So
hold on, I'm going to get a pen.
The format of the show, Greg, is really has really kind of stayed the same.
Yeah,
The way in which we
that's a really good format. I should probably take some notes from that.
But what I love about yours is, Greg, like we're kind of doing similar things, as you say,
Yeah,
but we're doing it in a different guise. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important. Yours is obviously longer form, unedited, unscripted, and it captures the real essence of the conversation. This is different in the sense where we're pulling apart the conversation. So the way in which we record it is I go out and do the interviews. I then pass that on to my co-host. They then unpick the conversation, pull out all of the key business learnings. They produce a basically production notes of that episode. And then we then go into the studio and have another conversation around the original conversation.
But I do love that. I do find that really interesting because it reminds me of something that I used to and still kind of love, but it doesn't really exist as much now, which is director's commentaries on DVDs. I used to love that. I'm a bit of a film nerd, and my favorite ever movie ever made was Alien, by Ridley Scott, and I would sit there and I would listen to the commentary by him and some of the other people involved in the cast and stuff, and there were multiple ones, right? It wasn't just him. That I find hugely interesting to watch them. I would watch the movie first, and then I'd stay up even later and watch the one straight after. No matter how many times I heard it, it was still amazing. And there's something about that insight from people who know what they're talking about that adds a layer of context, or sometimes even just points to the things that subconsciously I picked up on or something like that. So I love that approach to the way you guys do it.
Thank you, Greg. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's like really reinforcing the learning, and it brings the listener on the journey with you. So it feels like they're closer to the conversation. And also, as you say, it gives us the ability to add our own spin, perspective, analysis on the conversation as well. And just from a kind of a basic point of view, it breaks up the audio. So it kind of cuts back and forth between the interview and the studio, back and forth on kind of 6 kind of clear occasions. I mean, it does make the editing a lot more difficult. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, like we've got an audio editor, and now we launched video back in March of this year, which we're a bit slow to do. We'll probably come onto that in due course. But yeah, it does make the editing obviously a lot more tricky. But I think the format it's our USP. I think it's our way that we stand out from the crowd. It's different to most podcasts. It's like the kind of goggle box kind of format of doing a show. So I think.
So how frequently are you able to release episodes?
So we do bi-weekly on a Monday evening at 8 p.m. So just on that note as well, Greg, in terms of the show, we've done now 5 seasons of Founded and Grounded. We're launching season 6 in September. We're just finalising one remaining sponsorship place for that. But it's been an absolute journey, if I'm being honest. So Andrew and I basically did 3 seasons together. So 50 episodes. And it was great because he lived locally to me, and we were able to do stuff. And obviously lockdown happened, and we were, it all kind of changed during that period. And we reverted from doing it in either his garage or kitchen into doing it like this online. And I think during that time, it gave us a real sense of purpose, and the show carried on. Like we were like really conscious, like we have to keep this going because running a business is bloody lonely enough as it is, as you know, Greg. And I think without that face-to-face contact, like people will essentially go crazy. I know I was at points. I was just like, right, you need to consume content. You need to feel part of something. You need a belonging.
Yeah, we're social animals.
You need a purpose.
That was probably the worst thing that could have happened to us. Was as a species is lock us away from each other. That's just not how we operate. But and I imagine it was probably very lethargic as well, and medicinal, and to some extent for your guests and for your listeners, right? For the same reason that they had, especially your guests, they'd have a chance to, talk about their exploits and kind of reminisce at a time, bygone, where they used to be able to run a business.
Exactly.
Pre global collapse. So it must have been quite good for them.
Yeah, I think it was, and like you say, and being very selfish, good for me personally as well. I think it's that great thing about podcasting. Like, I think for me, and I'm sure you found this as well, is like the access to amazing founders. Like, that is one of the biggest things for me personally, to be able to have those amazing conversations and just be able to open a door I think is incredibly powerful. Like, I mean, when I started the show, obviously I was like literally pulling favours left, right, and centre, and begging and borrowing and trying to persuade people to come on the show. And then there obviously a tipping point on that journey where we get lots of inbound demands. We get pretty much daily emails, people saying, "Can we feature on the show?" Which is a great position to be in. But the kind of the problem's flipped on its head. Now it's like really hard because I have to cherry pick exactly who we want to come on the show. We've got a form that people fill out to say, look, that maybe the time's not right, but if you want to be considered for a future season, fill this form out and we'll kind of get back to you. But if I'm being honest, that process has become a bit unmanageable because we've only got a limited. We're basically commissioned by our sponsors to do 17 episodes. So our current sponsors are the National Protective Security Authority, who basically want to help tech founders protect their innovation from kind of state actors and corporate espionage and all those underhanded things. Like, you just have to look at the IT outage last week as well, things like that. So they're doing a great job there to help founders. And then also Hexa Finance, so they're basically a finance brokerage. And there's always a recurring theme on the show is like access to finance, so they can help any businesses of any size to access finance as well. So they make it possible to do the show. As I say, that's 17 episodes. But what it does mean is, obviously, as I can imagine with you as well, you've got this outmatch of supply and demand. And it's like, I don't want to ghost people. Like, I hate doing that. I think there's too much of that in the world. So it's like, how do I manage expectations about coming on the show? Which I don't know.
Totally.
What do you do, Greg?
Honestly, I probably should have a bit more stringent kind of rules around it. My problem is I just say yes to anyone that I feel like I can have a good conversation with. So I'm already really like, I only started booking for this season a few weeks ago, and already it's booked for like the next few months because I just say yes. I mean, all I do is I say I'm not taking bookings now, and then okay, I'm taking bookings now, and then it floods in, and then I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, because of my criteria, as you know, is just jump on a quick call, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I'm like, cool, there's a good vibe. I can see myself talking with you for an extended period of time. Can you see yourself talking to me for an extended period of time? Yes. Okay, cool. Like that is pretty much it.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Yeah. So it puts me in a weird position. But I do this for very, very selfish reasons. Like, I'll be completely honest. I do this show purely because I love speaking to people and I love hearing what people have to say. Like, it feeds my natural curiosity to just ask questions about people. That's it. That's ultimately what it is. And if people like listening to it, cool. I have no idea why, but awesome.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is like there's no like hidden agenda, Greg. Like, you're being very clear about you're getting something out of it.
Yeah,
and
totally.
There's an audience that are obviously lapping it up and consuming it and enjoying the show. And then it's very natural and organic. And like you say, I think there's something very important in there about having that energy and having that I hate the word vibe, but that kind of connection with someone.
I like the word vibe. You can use the word vibe.
Vibe. Okay, maybe it's overused, but anyway, so I think it is that important energy of like having a good conversation with somebody and just seeing where it goes. And I just have to say as well, like, a massive shout out to you for obviously connecting on LinkedIn, and then just saying, we're doing a similar thing. Like, we're not competing. Let's collaborate.
No, not at all.
And, let's open up that conversation. And
I want to see more of that happen in the startup world in general. Like, there are so many businesses that have the same target markets, the same ideal customer profiles, and I'm just thinking, like, what are you doing? Like, I'm fortunate enough to have quite a few clients that where that tends to happen. And what do I put them in touch with each other. I say, talk to each other, figure out ways to collaborate. Because I'm just like, there's a missed opportunity, especially in SaaS. Like, I've been on record as saying for a number of times, like, from a product design perspective, I want to see more SaaS solutions having a little button that says, like collaborators or partners in it, and it's other startups, and you're just saying, go and visit their website. Like, even if there is some slight overlap to the point of slight competitor, it doesn't matter. It all,
I think
trust me, there's enough business for everyone. Customers want choice, and if you provide that with them, they'll remember you. You know
100%,
what I mean?
Greg, 100%. And I think I had a great quote the other day that, the basically the people at the bottom are competing, the people at the top are collaborating. And I think it's such a powerful message in the sense that, other businesses, even if they are slightly similar, they've got access to the same audience. Like, like the whole synergy of like 1 + 1 isn't 2, right? It's simple maths, and you can help each other. And I think if people are a bit more strategic about that, and maybe they're just not aware of the opportunities, because like me, you've got good access to lots of businesses and founders. Like, you can spot those opportunities, and I'm constantly introducing people and connecting people. But you can't see it if you don't know, do you? That's the point. So maybe there's a marketplace. Maybe we should talk again, Craig, about a vehicle in which to do this.
I had thought about it. It's on my increasingly long list of ideas, and you know what it's like, man. When you're in this world, and especially when you're a founder, you can't switch that part of your brain off. So but I've got to execute on a couple first. Or what I tend to do is I give the ideas to other people. I just be like, okay, I've had this. I did this with one of my clients. They had the genesis of something. I can't say who it is because they're quite well known, and I don't want to be seen as like I'm stealing their thunder for their good idea, but it was me. But they basically had the genesis, the seed of something. I was like, do you know what? This reminds me of a very similar idea I had a few years ago. Let me explain it to you. Explained it all to them, and they were like, that's awesome. And I was like, have it. I don't want it. I'm never going to do anything with it. And then they turned it into that. And now it is this. And now it is this thing. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm happy because that thing exists. You know what I mean? I wanted it to exist, and now it's there. So.
I mean, that's such a powerful thing. Like, I think that's the thing that I love about entrepreneurship is like you can have an idea in your head and you can actually make that a reality. And like, I think what you've done there is great in the sense that if you knew you weren't going to act on it, then tell it to someone else, and then it's out there in the world.
Right.
Which is incredibly important. I think, as you probably know as well, like speaking to founders, like you get people on two sides of the fence. Some people are very protective of ideas and don't want to talk about, and other people who are obviously shouting about it from the rooftops. And I do think the latter category there, 9 times out of 10, those founders will more likely succeed if they're, like ideas are cheap, aren't they? It's all about execution at the end of the day.
And no, I agree. And for me, actually, I've noticed a very distinct pattern there in the same way that early in my career, I noticed a pattern around leaders. So as someone who spent the majority of his career as a leader before then, entering that phase as a founder. And as a leader, I found that leaders that were successful led in collaboration, and they didn't, the way they learned, the way they led effectively was by being very, very forthcoming and transparent with everything they know. They wanted to pour their knowledge and experience in anyone they came across and any opportunity they got, because they were like, I want you to succeed, so I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you every piece of me in order to execute that. And then once I've done that, I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch you and I'm going to learn from you. Right? That was the number one distinction. I used to say it's the difference between leaders and managers. And for me, with the same thing with founders is, I mean, you need to have that and many, many other skills as well that are very selfless to boot. But then when it comes to ideas, I think you need to have that principle of being so divorced from them to that extent. You can be passionate about them, but ultimately just wanting them to exist in the world. You're passionate about them existing, not passionate about owning them. And because if you are passionate, so defensive or passionate about owning them, that's the difference, in my view, from being I suppose a boss or something of a dictator and being a founder. A true founder wants the idea to exist. And once you get in that mindset, going back to what you're saying about competitors, you encourage competition, because then you want it. You're like, brilliant. The customer now has multiple choices to solve that problem. I care about that. That's the way you look at it. You don't look at it as, or do we have enough market share, etc., etc. It's like, my company can go under. I don't care, as long as the customer gets their problem solved in the best way possible. That's the difference, because a true entrepreneur or founder at that point will just simply go, cool, I'll move on to my next idea.
100%.
I've got plenty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
There's a lot of
I think
founders that shouldn't be founders.
yeah, no, I think there's so much in that to kind of unpick that I think that, you know, it ultimately comes back down to obviously your mindset and the way that you look at things, which is a big part of entrepreneurship. And I think that, you know, giving a very basic example, like competition does bring out the best for the consumer, but B, the businesses who are operating in that space. Like as an example, like, you know, High Street locally here in Bristol, there's about 14 barbers on the street. I mean, some of them might be
They're going
doing
to be started
something
on barbers.
illegal, but you know, what it does do is it raises the bar because they're doing deals on beard and haircut, son
Right.
and dad, giving you a drink. Like they're all trying to outcompete one another, and that means greater choice. And ultimately, the market decides, doesn't it? Like it's that equilibrium, and you know, ultimately the best ones are going to thrive, and the ones which aren't too good are going to go out of business, unfortunately.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's bring it back just a little bit though to your podcast and you'll notice this theme of tangents. But so thank you for indulging me. But so you're like you said, you're just about to release season. Is it 6?
Yeah.
In September. So can you give us any kind of indication, like, you know, are you able to say any of the guest names? Is that publicly out there, or is it kind of just, you know, episode by episode you announce that? What can you tell me about?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Yeah, I can say a couple of them for sure. Like one of them is really interesting in the sense that he's a very young person who's made his way in the media world.
Okay.
And he is the manager of a group called the Sidemen. So Jordan's going to be on the show, which I'm very excited
I don't know Jordan.
about.
I know of Jordan. That's awesome. I'd love him to be a guest on it. Put in a good word for me, will you?
I will. I'm meeting him next week, so
cool.
I'll say if you want to do other kind of startup podcast, then definitely go on yours, Greg. But yeah, we've got people who are disrupting the rental market, a company called Hyber that was started here in Bristol by a young entrepreneur. We've got somebody running a business called Optimize AI, which is basically trying to do data efficiency for commercial buildings using an AI model and making them more energy efficient. So it's obviously having an impact on the carbon footprint. We've got a whole range of businesses. I'm not going to plug all of them right away, but sure. What I love is just like the variety on the show, like in terms of like what we're looking for. I guess it's people who have got a kind of purpose about the business. So like, what is their big, hairy, audacious goal? Like, what are they trying to do in the world? What are they trying to solve? If it's just literally selling widgets, then is that really that interesting? For me, it's not. They have to be in the early stages of entrepreneurship typically. So normally we're looking for kind of sub 5 years of trading, and they basically have to have the main requirement for us is that they have to be talk willingly and openly about the business, about the what's and all journey. So if people are just going to do like sound bites talking about winning awards and raising rounds of funding, then I'm just like, or if they've got loads of good PR anyway, I'm like,
I've had a couple of those on the show. I'm not afraid to say it. Where it's like, I'm trying to dig in it, and it's like, well, you know, it's been great. We didn't. I'm just, you know, come on. Like not to try and you know shit on their life or their journey, but still, it's like there comes a point where it does come across a bit like positivity porn, and you're like, you know, can we drop the facade and just, you know, be you a little bit? But it usually what happens after a while, I find. But
and I think, like you say, it's like getting under the skin of founders, isn't it? Like if they're giving you all the surface level stuff, you're like, well, you know, I could have read a press release and it would have told to be the same level of information, right? Let's talk about.
Do you find that it's difficult though, especially for early stage startups that are fundraising, to get comfortable in that situation, because they feel like there may be something on the line there from a PR perspective, that if they were to go a little bit too not negative, but just too warts and all style, that they're scared that it might put off potential investors, or maybe even damage their relationship with existing investors. Have you found that?
If I'm being honest, no. No one's ever fed that back. I think that what we always do is, obviously, in terms of our show, it is edited. So as a I suppose a benefit to the founders, we always do send it to them ahead of release.
I was going to ask if you did. Right, you do.
Just to see that they're happy with it. We've only had one company come back and say they weren't happy. It was back in either season 1 or season 2, it was a legal startup. And
Oh well, yeah, of
that
course.
says
I mean,
it all, right? So
yeah. I mean, I'm
yeah.
surprised they didn't send it back 2 or 3 times, but I'm pretty sure on their mandate internally was find at least one thing, because that's basically what their entire thing is. Right?
But coming back to your question, I think like unless you're like giving away something very commercially sensitive, or you're like bad mouthing someone, like I think investors would just rather know like your journey, like your honesty, like what you've actually been through as a founder. Like I think that's what defines entrepreneurs, is that grit and resilience ultimately are the two of the biggest factors. So like if you've seen somebody go on this journey and you're like, wow, how have they come through that, and now they're putting this business out into the world, then that is a good marker of a founder for me. So I don't know, I haven't come across it yet, but I'm not saying that would never happen.
I was thinking a little while ago of doing a little spin-off show, starting a small spin-off show, and it would be Founders Anonymous. And
Nice.
the idea would be very, very short episodes, like 10, 15 minutes long, but basically going back to old guests, anonymizing them, and then asking them some, tell me your horror stories. It would basically be like the founder horror stories kind of thing. And I know for a fact that they exist because of almost every single one of my guests have told me those stories when we've met in other situations where they just said, or even before the podcast, I can't tell you on the show. I can't tell you this on the show. I can't tell you this on the show. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually about investors. That's the thing. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of founders have these stories, but because investors talk, they could never share this stuff, or they're under NDA, because it was like usually there's always a horror story to do with an exit as well. If you ever speak to an exited founder,
they can't say anything, can they?
Can't say
like
anything.
Tied, yeah, they're
so they can't even really say anything to me. There's sometimes just to give me hints, and then be like, I'm under NDA, definitely can't mention it on my show. So okay, I've actually got someone coming up on this season whose NDA was voided because they ended up going to court over something. So that's going to be interesting. There's going to be a very interesting horror story about an exit, which I don't think we just don't hear about because they are all behind NDAs. So that's going to be hugely interesting. But
I think it's a great idea, Greg. I would, yeah, I'd love to see that.
It's just a lot of work.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
And then it involves editing, and I know that's not my bag, man. Like I've done enough editing. I did editing at uni and stuff like that. I'm like, and I've chosen the light route. I totally worship the fact that you guys put as much time and effort in your show as you do. Honestly, it shows, number one, in the quality. But I do not have the patience for that. So bravo to you.
I mean, I don't personally do the editing, so I can't take credit for that.
Oh, well, that's fine then. So I'll back everything I just said then. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah. But coming back to your point though, like, yeah, I think one of the ideas that I had as well, so we've done this piece at the moment where basically we've had 99 founders on the show. So one of the key parts of the show, as I said before, is like trying to get them to distill down their one piece of advice for an early stage founder. So we've got these like amazing, snippets from every episode. So basically what we're doing is we're compiling all of them into what we're calling a mixtape. And we're going to be putting it out there. And we've done like this like kind of like stupid cringeworthy video where me and Becky have like done this like skit on 99 problems, but I've got 99 founders and advice ain't the one. So basically
that doesn't sound cringe at all. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you. It was very cringe recording, and it's going to be released soon. So I'll let you know when it comes out. It's funny
you said that the second you said 99, I was going to make a Jay-Z joke, and so you beat me to it. So we're in the same headspace. So that's cool.
There we go. Good stuff. So we're releasing that, but going back over that content, like I'm looking at some of the businesses, obviously, because we started in 2019, have naturally failed, which is the nature of what we do and who we support. Right, up to 90% will fail after 5 years. So the stats are a lot higher than that, which is great. But it's about like I'd love to do like a post-mortem investigation with some of those founders talking about the emotion that they went through having to close down a company, because it is a lot. But I think the shining light is that they're now all doing something different as a result of running that business.
Right.
So I think that the thing about entrepreneurship for me is like, if everyone got rid of the idea that they will, fail, then they wouldn't be so scared to put everything out into there, because it will put you onto the next path. even if ultimately your business does die.
It's about reframing that failure, right, and seeing it as just, okay, well, this is just a stepping stone to the next thing. It's never failure, it's just evolution. No. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, well, I was just thinking there, like, I've spoken to a few that have had, quote unquote failures, businesses that haven't worked out in the past. And again, though, there's been sometimes a resistance to talk about that for similar reasons that I mentioned, to do with existing shareholders and things like that. And privately, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I was an idiot. Like, I made a huge mistake there. I did this, but and now I've got a new team around me, a new venture. I have to be careful how I word that. I don't want to, no, because it's a fine balance. You want to be transparent as a founder, but also you do need to be careful. You don't want to undermine yourself in the eyes of people that are rallying around you very early on in an idea and all that. It's tough. It's a very, very fine balance. It's difficult, but anyway, I want to ask you something. Out of all of the episodes you've recorded, is there a particular episode that's really stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, lots people always ask me this question. I'm sure you get it as well, but
all the time.
It's a hard one to answer because we've had such an amazing variety of guests, and that's what, to answer the question, that's what we are very passionate about, is that diversity. Like 35% of our guests are women. We are increasing that. 26% are from a BME background. So yeah, I think we are very passionate about diversity. Because it doesn't often get a voice. So it is about making sure that underrepresented founders are represented. In terms of like stories, though, I think the case of By Sarah London, which was started by two sisters. One of them had leukemia, and basically her sister ended up being a donor, and she had a 20% survival rate. And she basically pulled through. But during the process of going through chemo, like, all of her skin started going really bad. And her sister actually worked for some of the, had an amazing career in like working for L'Oreal and some amazing skincare brands. And she was like, right, let's try and develop something just for you and your skin, what you're going through at the moment. And she basically put together all of these natural formations using natural products, making sure there was no shit in them. And basically her skin started changing. And they basically developed this organic business from this very personal problem. Mm-hmm. And now they're doing amazing. Like Lauren and Sarah, it's an amazing business. And I think their story is just like the genesis of like what they were going through at that time and where they are now, and a business has actually come out of that. I think that's incredible. So I definitely urge people to go back and listen to that episode.
I'll have to check that one out. I mean, yeah, that's the very antithesis of solve a problem you understand, right? Like, that's that's amazing.
Yeah, but there's lots. I mean, like I say, the kind of, we did sort of 50 seasons together, me and Andrew, and there was a point where obviously he basically
50 seasons.
50 episodes, not 50
right,
seasons. Yeah. No, we're not quite there.
You're looking good for your age, man.
Thank you, man. So basically Andrew was like, right, he had a full-time job. He was running his side hustle business. He was doing the podcast. It's like, I don't have enough hours in a day to do this. And I was like, that's completely understandable. I wasn't doing the editing side of it. And
if you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
I was like, I don't want this show to die. Like, it's not about me. Like, this show has built up a great audience. Like, if we look at the stats of our show, like, the guests do more of the speaking than the hosts. So, and I think that's really important. And like yours, like, you let your guests speak rather than, it's not the Greg show, right? It's about the content and the founders. So
every now and then it is.
Well, sometimes you've got to have a bit of personality, right? But what I'm trying to say is that, it's we didn't want it to die, and I was like, right, if we want to take this to the next level, we need to make it sustainable. We need sponsorship. So we went out and got 2 sponsors for season 4. We got a new host in Laura Rawlings, who is one of the most amazing humans that I know. She basically did all of season 4 for us. Very sadly, though, like last year, she was diagnosed with cancer as well, and she's got a daughter the same age as my son, 5 years old, and like her world just got turned completely upside down, and it puts obviously absolutely everything in perspective. And you know, the way in which she's sort of handled herself and like being like this beacon of positivity is like just I don't know how she does it, like literally incredible. And she's gone through loads of chemos, she's had an operation, she's just been through the mill, but she's been so positive throughout the entire time. And she's actually now, she's like, one of the things she got from, we had Simon Squibb as a past guest, and like she started engaging with a lot of his content, and it's about, you know, what is your dream, right? And you know, I think some of the stuff is a bit kind of cheesy, but the reason that he does it, I think, is incredible. And he's like getting people to follow their dreams essentially. And she was like, right, I'm just gonna go for it. So basically, she set up a health and well-being sauna with her sister-in-law in rural Wiltshire where she lives, and like that is her dream. And she's just gone, fuck it, I'm doing it. And exactly, life's too short, man. And she's been inspirational to me, and it just puts everything in perspective, right? And I think just the courage and the humility, and you know, she's a very funny person anyway, but she's still cracking jokes, and like she's still like exactly the essence of Laura. And just she's been great. But it meant that obviously we had to then look for a new host because she didn't have the time to commit to the show. So we've got in Dr. Becky Sage for season 5, and she's going to be rejoining in season 6, which is great. But you know, it's, I guess I'm the only consistent in the show, is that, you know, we kind of set it up, and it, you know, it's, as I said before, it's kind of morphed and evolved over time. And I think the in terms of like Andrew being a co-host, and then Laura, like they came from a broadcasting background, like amazing at like hosting a show and like pulling out the story and the threads and asking these amazing questions. And I think the angle that we've gone in now is a bit more analytical, like because Becky's been a twice over founder herself. She knows like the startup journey very, very well, and raised rounds of funding, won lots of awards, etc. And she's now taken the analysis side of the show to the next level. Like we are really unpacking the business models. Our shows typically were probably about 50 minutes to an hour. Now they're verging on like an hour and 20, an hour and a half. But the feedback we got from our listeners is great, because they love that analysis side of the business. So yeah, it's the show, as I say, sort of morphed. And you know, there's been times, Greg, I'm being honest, where I've gone, right, this is too much, I'm just gonna
I can totally understand that. Yeah, I mean that's why they say most podcasts don't make it past, like, what is it, they say if you can make it past 20 episodes, then you're generally, because most don't make it past 20. I'm really looking forward to being on, by the way. We should mention. I
can't wait to do it. Yeah,
we should mention that I'm.
Sorry, I didn't plug you before, Greg, but
No, that's cool. I'll clip this bit. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I don't know which episode's going to be out first, whether it's this one or that one. I don't know, because obviously we both record them in advance, and you have editing to do. I don't know, probably this one, I'd imagine, just based on the fact that you've got to edit. But I don't know, I could be wrong. But I'm really interested in going for that experience. Although I must say, I do feel really, really sorry for whoever's got to do the analysis part of our conversation.
Well, that's Becky,
you know how I talk. So good luck, Becky. That's what I'm going to say. And that is both a very genuine good luck and also a bit of a threat. So
double-edged sword.
See you later, Becky.
Yeah. No, she's great at like getting to the heart of a person, and sort of unpacking.
Well, good. Listen, man, like if she can make sense of what I've got to say, then she must be good.
Can. Yeah. She's great, and she gets.
I'm going to listen to it
myself
to understand what the fuck I was talking about. You know what I mean? I'm going to take notes. So that's cool.
Yeah. But people do love that side of the show, because like I go and obviously we have the conversation, but then they don't, until they've obviously, when I sent them and they listen to it, like they don't know that other half of the show has happened,
right?
And how we unpick it and break it down. So guests do tend to like that bit of the show, and then how it's obviously all kind of seamlessly weaved together as well. But
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're recording
a bit self-indulgent, but pretty cool.
Oh, sorry, I was talking over you there.
That's cool. We talk over each other all the time on this show. It's fine. Yes. So yeah, my apologies. But no, that's really cool. That's really exciting. And I'm curious to see where it goes. Like I think we spoke a little bit before about some of the plans. Actually, do you know what? Let's go backwards before we go too far forward.
Okay.
Because you said something right at the beginning, which I wanted to pick up on, which was in your introduction. You were talking about consultancy and how you were, you and you recently told me something off air that we need to pick up on as well. So working consultancy, you said fundamentally because you think it was a fundamentally broken industry. Was that what you said? I don't know if
it was, Greg. Yeah, I mean,
so what did you mean by that?
If you look at the UK economy, I don't know the latest stats, but there's something about 5.8 kind of small businesses in the UK, right? So that makes up a huge part of the economy, and I think where we're kind of supporting in terms of like government support is very skewed towards, and rightly so. I'm not saying this is a problem in by itself, is that it's looking at very like spin outs, R&D focused businesses that are going to be those unicorns and going to obviously 10x the economy in terms of their kind of a return on investment and have that scalability, right? But I think the fact that a lot of small businesses don't get the access to the support they need, and the way in which the UK typically supports businesses of small SMEs and one person bands, I'm not going to say one man bands because that's obviously not a correct term. It's essentially they bid on these big public sector contracts, right? So I used to work with lots of them, so the likes of Business West, I've worked with the Prince's Trust, Oxford Innovation, Future Space. Like a lot of it is they have to bid on these big contracts. They then win the tender to deliver this form of support, which usually looks like 12 hours of support for a founder. So it might consist of a workshop and a follow-up one-to-one, and it's very kind of cookie cutter in its approach. Like it's not, as you know, Greg, like every business is fundamentally different and they need personalized support rather than this like generic advice, because I think that's very dangerous. So these contracts are won by these large organizations who often aren't very entrepreneurial themselves because they've been involved in the game for a long time. The way in which they do it, they have to be very efficient in terms of the paperwork. So if you're going through a business support program, there will be some paperwork that you need to sign as a founder, and they're going to track your ass for the next 2 years. So when there is an output, so this is like you've employed someone or you've raised funding, or you've grown your turnover, they're going to be approaching you to say, can you sign this bit of paper? Because if you do that, then we can claim more funding because we're taking credit for what you've done as a business owner. So that is the side of business support that I saw kind of firsthand. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some amazing people in these organizations doing some great stuff. But I think the model of business support is broken. There is a lot of change, obviously, like us coming out of the EU. There was a lot of EU funded programs out there, so that's all changing. So I think we're at this point where it's a really interesting crossroads to see where business support in the UK goes. Like there's a great voice in the UK called Emma Jones who runs Enterprise Nation. She's very aware of this problem, and I think as a business owner, like you shouldn't be dictated what support you get based on where you live, based on the size of your business, based on who you should work with because of where you are. So you don't get any say in the matter. It's like because you live in the West of England area, you're going to work with X organization. Whereas if you wanted some business support, I would say it's far better to say, well, I know X, Y, and Z who I really trust, and I know they can get results for me. I would rather work with them. So there was a scheme a while ago called the Growth Voucher Scheme, where they did actually give business owners the discretion to be able to choose how they spent their business support funding. I mean, I think that's a far better model because it comes back to what you said before, Greg. It's about choice. And if you don't have choice and restriction, like it's a broken.
So what can we do to fix that?
It's a good question. I think it needs to be changed at a systematic level. Like this is a government level. I think we need to be involving the right types of entrepreneurial thinkers in the system. Like at the end of the day, a lot of it is bureaucratic, it's red tape. You know, they're like these organizations are being given funding for delivering this support that they deliver. And it's kind of business as usual. So that there is some disruption that is needed there. I think that, yeah, I would say like Enterprise Nation are doing some great stuff. It's about pulling together the right people to have an impact at a government level to be able to offer support that is fit for purpose for founders. Because I was guilty of this. Like you get people who'd never run a business and they'd be giving you business advice. Like how is that even possible? Like if you haven't been through it yourself, what although you've maybe got some of the skills and experience, like you don't know how it feels, you don't know how they think, you don't know the isolation that you feel as a business owner, they don't know what it's like to have 2 months left the runway. Like you can't empathize with all these things.
That is the main criticism of consultancy firms, is you usually get, lumped with some 20-something straight out of college who, and then, maybe someone else, some intern, and they form a team for you. But because they're a large organization, more often than not, they can't exactly put the founders of that organization on every case. So they have to grow and they have to expand. And I've seen that problem a lot with incubators and accelerators too. That more and more of them that I've either taken part in as like a guest lecturer or whatever you call it, or been there exactly, or supporting founders that have gone. Like sometimes they'll ask me to attend with them. Same thing. It's you've got someone who's specializing in talking about how to manage pricing. Another one is talking about how to manage governance. They've never done it. They've just studied it. Okay, that they are bringing with them a framework of, or they've studied all of the different versions of that, and they've worked with lots of different founders. So you've got to give them a certain amount of credit, both in that scenario and both with the consultancy. And they'll have developed these frameworks and so on. So, okay, there is some credence to it, but I do feel like there's a human element missing. There's the nuance missing there.
It's a nuance.
Yeah.
Disagree. Like, and don't get me wrong, like some advice, like if you're talking like regulation, governments, legal, like I think it's less important in those areas. Like that is
sometimes you just need to know the letter of the law.
Exactly. But if you're talking about mindset, how to sell as a founder, like things like this, unless you've run a business, you can't teach it, I don't think.
I agree, and part of the thing I think that led me to be the no bullshit advisor that I am is because a lot of it is to do with that, but mostly it's to do with the fact that, like you say, the cookie cutter sort of stuff, and I think one of the big mistakes a lot of these schemes, organizations, whatever you want to call them, make is that they fail to take into account, at the very least, the personal circumstances of that founder, which I think is a huge detriment, because in the same way that when we teach kids at school and we fail to recognize their situation at home, the relationships they have with their family, the relationships they have with their friends, we can't give them a correct path for learning. It's the same for founders. We can't give them a correct path for growth of the business if we don't understand if they've got bills that are mounting up, debt that's mounting up, if they've got good or bad relationships at home. You can say to them, right, this is the pathway you need to do to go out and sell, or to build your business, or to sit down and find X amount of hours to code per evening. The reality is these things are going to dramatically affect that.
It's so important, Greg. I think if you're a founder who's worked the way up their corporate ladder and has taken developed lots of savings and have got a big safety net, whereas somebody who's got a mortgage to pay, they've got kids to provide for, like those are or they're just coming out of uni, like there's entrepreneurs are an amazing mix of people across all ages, all genders, all diversity spectrums. And I think that, like you say, you've got to take into account the needs of that individual first and foremost.
I suppose, to play devil's advocate, though, I've worked a lot with, brick and mortar businesses too, right? And they're, more often than not, they've got a lot of businesses you see on the high street. I'm talking going back to like barbers, hair salons, nail salons, I don't know, like, tanning booth, whatever. Like there's a ton of different businesses you see on the high street that do okay. They do all right, but they don't do as well as they could. And that is because most of the time they don't have the business acumen. They know very little about sales and marketing and, maybe even how to do their books well, or, the law or things like that. And I think there is something to be said for an organization that can come in with a solid framework that just assesses, okay, this is what you know, this is what you don't know. We'll fill in those gaps and we'll provide some support to get you to that next level and reduce the stress of these things. There is definitely something to that. Yes, there is a certain amount of I think, understanding, the personal situation. But 9 times out of 10, with those sort of situations, it's just they're screaming to just wanting to understand the basics, or digital transformation, or whatever. So there is something to it. I mean, it wouldn't exist, I suppose, otherwise. But there is there is definitely a huge grey area that I can totally see what you're saying isn't being served well there.
And I think that there is lots of expertise delivering stuff, but it normally comes in the form of a workshop, or do you know what I mean? It's not understanding the needs of that specific business.
I see what you're saying.
And
so
that's what people want to know is, how is it applicable to my business?
Right.
Do you see what I mean? It's the delivery model is definitely broken.
No, I'm with you on that one, actually, because even in my sessions that I do, my rule is to always end with what are the practical steps that you can do from right now, from the end of this conversation, because I can't stand knowing that I'm just adding to the noise. So even if I'm just saying, oh, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that, maybe, I'm just worried they're going to walk away, their head's going to be full again. Just like after listening to a podcast or reading a book, or or speaking to other advisors and consultancy firms, they're just going to walk away like, oh fuck, I've got all that. Okay, now I've got all these ideas. What do they say? How do I do it? I don't. You know what I mean? And then it's just
you overwhelm them. Yeah, if you don't break it down.
And more often than not, that's the reason why founders and entrepreneurs struggle. They're overwhelmed because they're looking at all the stuff around them and like, should I be doing that? Should I be doing this? I don't know what that is. What do I do? So I'm like, okay, right. So distill it down. Step 1. Yeah. After this call, do this. Pick up the phone, open your laptop, and search for this. Do that. And then step 2, do this. Step 3, do that. And once you're done, give me a call, and we'll talk about what the step 4 is. I think sometimes it has to be like that.
Yeah, it does. Like you say, otherwise, people are just completely overwhelmed and they can't see the way forward. That's
entrepreneurs are cool people. But we overthink fucking everything. So. Yeah, you need to be careful what information you give to a founder, definitely. Because they'll just spin up another business around it.
So true. So true.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.